At first, the red light reveals nothing but a slow storm of particles. Then a shadow turns inside the darkness, and a wide body passes directly over the camera. It is close enough to erase everything else from the frame. A few moments later, another shape approaches from beyond the beam. This is the first of 10 cameras sent into places where the person holding the rope could not safely follow. And in several of the recordings, it looks as if the darkness noticed the camera first. The red illumination is meant to make deep-water animals less aware of the equipment. It creates a narrow island of color surrounded by black water. Anything beyond that island remains invisible until it chooses to enter. The first visitor glides across the lens like a ray. It could be an ordinary animal investigating an unfamiliar object. But the camera remains in place and the encounters do not stop. Suspended particles drift while another silhouette moves with purpose. It approaches the light, turns, and disappears at the edge of the red field. Later, a shark-like form crosses the same area. What changes the feeling of the recording is the repeated attraction to one exact point in an enormous body of water. Watch the closest pass again. The animal does not simply travel across the background, it changes direction near the camera and enters the brightest part of the beam. For a moment, its body blocks the light as though it has moved between the device and something behind it. When the red glow returns, the water beyond the animal appears empty. Deep-sea equipment is designed to observe without becoming part of the scene. In this recording, the camera may have done the opposite. Its light could have acted as a lure, a territorial marker, or a signal visible far beyond the distance we can see. The unsettling question is not why one animal came close. It is how many others may have been circling outside the beam, waiting for their turn to approach. The second camera is lowered through an old stone well. From the surface, the opening looks narrow and almost harmless. Sunlight reaches the first rows of masonry, the rope stays straight, and the walls show the ordinary damage expected from age and water. Below that point, the shaft tightens around the lens and the stones disappear into green darkness. The camera enters the water slowly. Bubbles and small fragments move past the frame, while the rope remains visible as a fixed reference. For several seconds, nothing changes except the color. Then a dark shape separates from the submerged wall. It does not fall with the debris or rise with the bubbles. It moves across the camera's path and vanishes behind the uneven stone. It may be a fish, a frog, loose material, or a shadow created when the camera rotates. But an abandoned well is a closed environment. Whatever lives inside it survives without daylight and with little reason to approach the surface. The new light may be the first disturbance to enter in years. On the second view, the shape is easier to notice against the masonry. It appears darker than the gap behind it and briefly changes direction before leaving the frame. The recording is too short to identify it, and the camera never follows it into the side of the shaft. The device was lowered to show the bottom. Instead, it captured something moving before the bottom was reached. Animal or trick of perspective, it was already there when the rope began to move. This opening is hidden among rock and fallen leaves. The people standing above it can see only a narrow break in the limestone, so they attach a camera to a rope and begin a controlled descent. At first, the walls stay close to the lens. Every turn reveals another sharp edge, another ledge, and another place where the equipment could become trapped. The camera passes through the tightest section and continues downward. The rope remains visible, but the wall beside it starts to fall away. The beam no longer fills the space. Instead of reaching a simple floor, the camera emerges into a chamber much wider than the entrance above. What looked like one vertical pit has opened into something that continues beyond the light. When the camera settles, loose stone and a large pale formation appear near the landing point. But the darkest part of the image is no longer beneath the lens. It is beside it. A low opening runs away from the chamber and the light cannot reveal where it ends. The rope moves across the frame while voices from the surface arrive as distant echoes. Natural caves can hide rooms larger than their entrances. Water may widen a lower layer while leaving only a thin fracture at the surface. The people above are standing over a space they cannot see, connected to it by one rope disappearing through the rock. The narrow throat and the final chamber hardly look connected. The camera was dropped to measure a pit. What it found was an entrance, and the deepest part may begin where the recording stops. The next recording comes from a camera lowered into an old mine shaft. Near the top, the light catches heavy beams, broken platforms, and the repeating geometry of a structure that has been decaying for years. The operator moves carefully, stopping whenever the cable approaches the timber. Nothing in the first part of the descent looks out of place. Then the camera turns toward the center of the shaft. Between the beams is a narrow, upright form. On the first pass, it is easy to dismiss as timber, torn fabric, or equipment left behind by the miners. The camera keeps moving, the shape disappears, and the ordinary structure returns. Later, the line brings the lens past the same level from a different angle. The form appears again. This time it looks less like part of the framework. It is too narrow for the nearest support, and there seems to be empty space on both sides of it. A pale upper section sits above a longer body-shaped shadow. Most disturbing of all, the form appears to face the open center of the shaft, the exact direction from which the camera is approaching. But watch the clean view before the image is enlarged. The surrounding beams shift as the lens moves, while the upright form holds its position. For a moment, it seems to occupy its own space rather than resting against the timber behind it. The operator notices it as well, and the mechanical rhythm of the descent changes. There is not enough detail to call it a person. If it is debris, it has fallen into an extraordinarily human position. If it is not debris, then something remained standing inside a shaft no one expected to enter, and faced the camera when the light arrived. The water in this geothermal opening looks bright blue from the surface. To test what lies below, a phone is secured to a line and lowered through the center. The first images are surprisingly clear. Light follows the device beneath the surface, particles move past the lens, and the rock around the opening remains visible. As the phone descends, the color changes. The blue becomes deeper, the suspended material becomes denser, and the movement in the water no longer matches what was visible above. At one point, the camera crosses a boundary so abrupt that it looks like a second surface hidden beneath the first. The phone appears to hesitate inside this lower layer. Particles continue moving, but the walls and line change position more slowly. A thermal current could explain it. Water layers of different density and mineral content can distort light until a shallow space looks bottomless. But the view below the boundary is different in another way. The visible water seems to move upward while the lens continues down, creating the impression that the opening is drawing material from somewhere deeper. The bright blue chamber gives way to a darker region that the phone's light cannot penetrate. The fear comes from the water itself. The camera was lowered through one visible pool and appeared to enter another environment beneath it. It may be only temperature, minerals, and pressure, or the colored surface may be the illuminated mouth of a deeper system. Some places are too unstable for a person to inspect directly. In this recording, a remote camera is sent into a damaged interior at Fukushima. The image is low resolution and technical, filled with telemetry, haze, and electronic noise. At first, the machine reveals broken surfaces and a floor covered by material the operator can examine only through a screen. As the camera moves farther inside, the picture begins to pulse. Bright spots bloom and disappear. Fine noise spreads across the image, and the room seems to lose its edges. Radiation can interfere with a camera sensor, producing flashes and patterns that were never present in front of the lens. In a place like this, visual corruption is expected. One bright form behaves differently. While the camera position changes and the interference moves across the frame, the pale area remains close to the same point in the room. It has no clean outline, yet it appears to contain a darker center, almost like an empty shape cut out of the haze. The effect may come from damaged optics, reflective material, or overlapping electronic artifacts. But the machine has entered because human eyes cannot safely verify what it sees. If the camera becomes unreliable, there is no second witness. Near the end, the interior fades beneath light and static. The fixed form remains for a moment, then disappears with the room. Nothing moves toward the camera. Nothing needs to. Something inside the image seems to remain still while everything else breaks apart. An iron grid covers the entrance to the next shaft. A long cable is fed through one of the openings, carrying a camera and its light into the circular darkness below. Near the surface, the rock walls remain visible. The camera rotates, the green spool turns, and small particles drift through the beam. As more cable is released, the shaft loses its scale. The walls sometimes fill the frame and sometimes vanish beyond the light. Dust and insects reflect near the lens, each appearing briefly before changing direction. Far below those moving reflections, a small blue-white point appears. It is dimmer and steadier than the particles around the camera. As the lens rotates, the point remains separated from the nearer glare. It disappears when the wall blocks the view, then returns in approximately the same part of the open darkness. The simplest explanation is reflection from wet rock, metal, or the rig itself. The twisting cable may make that reflection appear fixed. At this depth, perspective is almost impossible to judge. Yet the point gives the shaft a second center. The camera's own light is moving with the lens, while the distant glow seems to wait below it. The operator continues releasing cable, but the recording never provides a clear object attached to that glow. "1,000 feet is deep enough for a small light to lose all connection to the world above. It may be a reflection created by the equipment. It may be debris catching the beam. But if it is neither of those things, then the camera did not descend into complete darkness. Something farther down was already shining back." The next device enters a moulin, a vertical channel cut through glacial ice by meltwater. The team secures a cylindrical camera to a tether and lowers it into a place shaped by moving water rather than stone. The first meters are bright. Light passes through the ice, revealing smooth blue surfaces and narrow ledges. A depth counter remains visible as the camera drops. Around 35 meters, the shaft still looks like a vertical tube, with the tether leading directly back toward the surface. Deeper down, the image becomes unstable. Water crosses the lens, the light spreads through bubbles, and the walls begin to disappear. Near the 94-meter mark, the camera still faces a recognizable ice channel. Close to 100 meters, that geometry changes. Turbulent white water fills part of the frame, while a darker space appears beyond the visible wall. A moulin can bend, split, or join a horizontal passage beneath the ice. The dark area may be a normal turn enlarged by limited light. But for a few seconds, it resembles a hollow chamber under the glacier. The last clear images do not reveal a floor. They show a boundary where the orderly shaft gives way to water and darkness. The camera reached almost 100 meters, but the route beneath the ice continued beyond it. What looks like a hole from the surface may be only the first vertical section of something spreading far below the glacier. The ninth camera is attached to an improvised rig with more than one lamp. The extra light is important because once the device enters the shaft, there will be no daylight and no easy way to correct a failure. Almost immediately, the source recording reports a problem. One of the lights has been lost. The descent continues on the remaining beam. Circular rock walls pass close to the lens, then fall away into blackness. Dust and small fragments flash white as they cross the light. With only one lamp working, every rotation creates a hard boundary between visible stone and empty dark. Later, a small blue-purple glint appears away from the main beam. It may be an internal reflection from the surviving lamp. Moisture, a scratched lens or cable could create this colored flare. If the first lamp came loose, it could have fallen deeper into the shaft. The camera would then be descending toward its own lost light. That could explain why the point appears below and differs from the surviving beam. The recording does not show the lamp breaking away, and the glint never becomes clear enough to identify. But compare the rig at the surface with the later point in the darkness. The experiment begins with two sources of light. It continues with one. Then, deep below, a second light-like object appears where the missing lamp might have fallen. It may be nothing more than optics, or the shaft may have returned the first light from a place the camera had not yet reached. The final location is a geothermal formation known as Diana's Punchbowl. From above, it resembles a circular pool set inside pale rock. The water carries a green-blue color, and reflections move across the surface. Near the center is a darker area that can look like a shadow, a change in mineral color, or an opening below the water. The first recording is short and relatively calm. It establishes the curved walls and the bright surface around the center. From this angle, the dark area appears contained within the pool, almost like a shallow stain beneath the water. A second recording shows the same formation from a different position. The water is darker, the reflected light has changed, and the center no longer looks flat. It resembles a black circular opening descending beneath the visible pool. The surrounding reflections move, but the darkest part remains fixed. Exposure can change the apparent depth of water dramatically. Wind, clouds, mineral sediment, and the position of the camera may explain every difference between the two clips. The recordings were not made under controlled conditions, and they do not prove that the formation changed. Every camera in these recordings was lowered because the person above could not safely see what was below. Most of the strange details can be explained by darkness, pressure, damaged equipment, reflections, or unfamiliar geology. The remaining uncertainty comes from the same simple fact: the camera always returns with only part of the view. At Diana's Punchbowl, the two recordings leave two versions of the same place. One shows a colored pool, the other appears to show an opening beneath it. Perhaps the difference is only light, or perhaps the water hides the final descent, the one no camera here was able to complete.